I'm joined by two gentlemen here. This is Ken Okwaro, who is the director at the Africa Center for People, Institution and Society, ACEPIS. Also in studio is Maurice Odora, Senior Investment Manager at Cyton Investments. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining me. And if I may start with you, Maurice, what is it that you expect from the president this afternoon as far as invigorating the economy goes?
Thank you. In today's president's speech, I expect to touch about the four agenda that is already established for the company, for the country for the next 5 years. But looking at president talking about food security, affordable housing that we've always been discussing year in, year out in the country, looking about how to address issues affecting manufacturing sector. Remember, this is one of the key employer sectors in Kenya. We also look about the talk about health, affordable to quality healthcare in the country. Generally, again, in terms of economic performance, and again, in terms of the discussions that have been going on in terms of the repeal of the interest rate cap, I expect them to touch on that because it's closely linked to economic performance, and also on the political side and about national cohesion and how people should now steer together in terms of making delivering the Kenyan promise. Yes.
Okay, Kenneth, you have any different opinion, or do you agree with Maurice?
Well, I tend to agree with a lot of the things Maurice has talked about already. But I also think the president will be going out to convince investors that the economic circumstances of the country is settling from the political circumstances that we had last year, and just going out there to give confidence to whoever wants to come and trade with us, wants to do investment with us, and also to try and allay some of the fears regarding corruption, regarding the debt situation, some of the things that some of our trading partners and investors have usually had a problem with our country.
And speaking of last year, just as you've mentioned, we know it was a fairly difficult year for many economic sectors. Look at agriculture, the backbone of the economy, performed dismally. Look at construction. I mean, look at even transport and other areas in this aspect. What do you think must be done, Kenneth, to breathe life in these sectors so that we can have the economy being spurred?
Well, I think first of all we need to decide and agree what are the sectors that are growing our economy as it is. Because for a long time in our country there has always been this statement, this colloquial statement, that agriculture is the backbone of our economy. But if you look at trends in our economy, you'll realize that some of the things that are growing our economy more, perhaps is not agriculture, perhaps it should be manufacturing or construction. But some of these areas, if you look at last year, for example, you see they saw slower growth, like manufacturing. And these are some of the places you would like to see more growth, because like we are opening our markets for international trade with the African continent. We just signed some trade deal the other day. So if we are going to benefit from this, we need to improve our manufacturing. So I think one of the things that really must be pushed in our country to increase growth is the aspect about manufacturing.
Speaking of manufacturing, Maurice, yesterday we had actually the president announce, it was the CS who announced, but on behalf of the president, an increment in the minimum wage payable to workers in the country. And prior to that, the manufacturers and employers at large had indicated they were not expecting such a move, yet it happened. They said it could lead to loss of jobs because of an increase in the operation cost. How do you see the situation panning out going forward, given that manufacturing is one of the big four agenda?
I think if you look at the performance of the Kenyan economy in the year 2017, manufacturing was one of the sectors that was hardly hit, partly as a result of interest rate cap, because now there was no credit flow to this sector for them to fund their activities. And again, generally, the operating environment was not that conducive for free movement of goods and services in the country. Going forward, what I expect to be done in the country is to ensure that at least we rework on the interest rate cap, if not repeal, but the best case scenario is just to do away with it. But in response, we're supposed to ensure at least we have financial institutions. I like to call them specialized financial institutions that are known that this institution, they lend money to specific sectors. And again, you look at the performance of agriculture that has traditionally been referred to as the Kenya's backbone. We now need to reconsider agriculture. We now need to move from the primary extraction agriculture that we are doing now to moving towards more agro-based processing, that now we stop exporting raw material, we export finished products. That one will help in terms of reworking the entire sector, moving manufacturing closer to agriculture, that now they get raw materials from there, they manufacture, then they export. And even generally just making the business environment more conducive even for foreign investors to come in. And again, that will help the problem of the problem of unemployment, and also the problem of exporting in terms of what are we actually exporting. Is it finished products or raw materials?
When it comes to manufacturing, as I had mentioned, perhaps, do you see any trickle-down effect as far as yesterday's pronouncement on minimum wage goes?
Well, I usually have a problem with the enforcement of those declarations. In fact, I think sometimes they are made in the previous year. Somebody goes on national TV on Labor Day and says you're going to take it to 10% or 5%. Actually, even the enforcement of it, I think sometimes it never trickles down to the person who works in the industrial area for some farm. However, I think just picking back from the point that Maurice was giving, I think there's something that we need to work on in terms of our ease of doing business. That is with the ingredients that the people who are doing manufacturing, for example. You see, we've had a problem with energy bills, so Kenya Power going back and forth about power, and now there's something which is increasingly coming up about water and could be very important in the future. So I think some of the ingredients that are needed, for example, in manufacturing or in some of our small and medium enterprises, we need to work on them. And I think as it is today, there's a lot that leaves to be desired.
We also have, besides food security, we also have matters to do with housing, I mean health, as well as manufacturing. Perhaps how best in these other sectors that we haven't touched about should we position ourselves to ensure that actually these are not just pronouncements and targets, but are actually targets that are achievable?
If you look at one thing that we've been discussing for a long period of time in Kenya is affordable housing. If you look at the main thing behind affordable housing, why it has not been achieved, is purely cost of financing. If you look at how banks operate in Kenya, it has not been unsustainable, and that was what led to the interest rate cap bill, which now again has not achieved the intended objective. What we're supposed now to move from here is the question we're supposed to ask ourselves is, how do we make credit accessible? How do we make credit cheap? How do we ensure that people are flowing, money is flowing to the economy, that now people it can spur economic activities? One of the things that need to be done is to even one of the pillars of Vision 2030 is affordable housing. We need to ensure that we work on the cost of capital to ensure that it's trickling down, enabling Kenyans to access this what we are calling affordable housing. Partly what can this can be done, we've already moved this in a step towards that, is number of disclosure in terms of the cost of loans, which again banks are supposed to adhere to. Another thing that now we need to do for credit to flow, we need to do away with the red cap, but we need to ensure that the consumer protection frameworks are very strong, so that we know, as you know, when something X happens, you know we have to report and you get solution even within 24 hours. Another thing that we need to address, we need to work on the dominance of banks in terms of providing credit in the Kenyan economy. In developed markets, banks provide only 40% of the total credit in the economy. In Kenya, banks provide about 95%, only leaving 5% the alternative funding mechanisms. Those are things we need to work on. Once we address all those, credit will be available at relatively cheaper prices, which again will enable people to access to be able to take mortgages to buy houses, will be used also to fund activities in manufacturing sector. Agro-based processing will start, will create jobs, and will now move to another level of economic status as a country.
I get it. Ken, do you look at repealing of the rate caps as a silver bullet to the current challenges that we're facing as an economy?
Well, it could just be one of the things that can change our circumstances, because we can say so much about the rate cap and try to put so much capital on it, but we can get to the point where it has been repealed, it has been changed, and we still have many other things to speak about. But I wanted to get back to the point about affordable housing. Maurice has talked about a more market-oriented approach to access to affordable housing, but there are also countries where they have mashed up market-oriented approaches with also public spending. if one of the focuses for the president is affordable housing, then also in our budget, there could also be budgetary allocations for state investment, perhaps in programs or projects that can increase access to affordable housing, especially in urban areas for Kenyans. So we can find a mashup between what we get from increasing credit or reducing the cost of putting together housing, but also with public spending that can then make it affordable, but also increase what we have so that most of us are able to access housing.
Okay, Morris, what's the role of government when it comes to actually enabling Kenyans have decent and affordable housing, given the fact that right now we know it's the private sector players that are actually providing housing, and we know they are in there for profits and not necessarily to house Kenyans?
If you look at the role of the government in any economy is to provide a conducive environment for private sector to work, to create jobs, to spur the economy, and in turn, the economy now moves to the next level. At our level where we are as Kenyan economy, we are still a lot more work to be done for us to realize even the affordable housing. Because private sector will tell you, I can't develop a house and sell at the price that you are stipulating at the cost of the affordable housing. Because if I look at all input costs, it's very expensive and I need to make a profit, still need to add a margin, I need to start, let's say, even at 6 billion. We are defining affordable housing at between 800,000 and about 1.5 million. But I will tell you it's not possible, it's not achievable. What government need to do, we need to come up to and ensure that we have a workable PPP, public-private partnership programs. And the key thing, we look at the cost structures so that we reduce the cost. We look at the cost of funding, which again we have to reduce. For this initiative, the private-public partnership to deliver affordable housing to Kenya that almost all Kenyans can afford, and almost, at least we even come to a point where we said we've realized one strand of Vision 2030. Yeah.
And when we talk about housing Kenyans, are we looking at home ownership, or should we also consider rentals as an option, Kenneth?
Well, I think we shouldn't focus on one, because all these are options for Kenyans to access. The point is affordable housing. Can I afford to stay in somewhere is decent? So whether I rent it or I own it, they can all be options that we should focus on. For the segment of our economy that are able to go for home ownership, I think it's a good idea. But also just making rental housing affordable and accessible to many of us, especially in our middle, lower income segments of the population.
Okay.